The show ended about 2 months before I was born, so I saw it in reruns. But I remember my grandmother and my mom would talk about it a lot. So I remember hearing about the Gone with the Wind sketch in particular, and those things um, growing up. And then I remember watching Annie. I had two younger sisters, and we'd watch Annie, and my mom was like, "That's Carol Burnett. She's the one she's a great sketch performer. She's one of the funniest women in the world. She's one of the funniest people who ever lived." So she had this kind of mystique about her. And then I saw them in reruns. I would come home from school, and I feel like they were like Mama's Family and Carol Burnett show were both like in reruns. So that's kind of, I saw it way after the fact, and it was kind of like I'd already seen um, Blazing Saddles, and I'd already seen Harvey Korman, and then I'd seen Tim Conway and Don Knotts in movies and things. So it was kind of like, oh, this is where they came from. Like, much in the same way um, SNL happened with that original SNL cast, where it was like you would see Stripes and Vacation and all these movies, and then go, oh, all those guys came from SNL. Oh, I get it now. Um, so that's how I first was introduced to the show. Well, I immediately had a crush on Carol Burnett. I mean, I had a huge crush on Carol Burnett. Just that Q&A thing at the beginning. How could you not? Like, it was so. Now I realize how bulletproof that was, because she's so charming and genuine and sweet and very American. It was a very American show. Like she was very confident and kind of like, how y'all doing? You know what I mean? She's like, I'm from Oklahoma. She's from Texas, I think, and so it just had this very welcoming feeling. It was all led from the heart, and it wasn't very, not that it wasn't cerebral, but from watching Monty Python and some other things, it was very different in that way. But it was such a smart thing doing that Q&A, because I just had a giant crush on her. And I think it's where I developed at a young age liking like kind of like just funny women. I just found it really attractive. Like she was, and that she looked so she's kind of like fragile, but she would do all this crazy physical comedy. You know what I mean? Like it would surprise you. Does that make sense? Like it always surprised me what she could do with her body. That I I had never seen that before, where she would do one funny thing. I don't know, she would fall, like she would do a pratfall, but then somehow pretzel herself into another weird position, and then go around in a circle in some strange thing. And I'd never seen that before. I'd never seen anyone do. I'd seen Buster Keaton or someone like that do that, but it was so. And that she was able to do this kind of stuff that you would equate with this kind of physical humor that you would equate with Jerry Lewis or what Jim Carrey would do and everything. But what she did that was so good was that she still had this like humanity about her. She was still playing. She was acting. She was performing, but people always talk about the difference between performing and acting. Performing is, hey, it's bigger and kind of broader. At Saturday Night Live, remember they say you have to perform because you're performing out to a live audience. And acting is very interior, and it's on film and maybe on the stage. You're going through, you're seeing someone thinking and stuff. And she did both. I really felt she did both, which is um, which taught me a lot. I didn't realize that until later, that when I started performing, how much I got from watching Carol Burnett in that way. Yeah, when she would come out and do those Q&As, it was smart, but it was also kind of, to me, you go, oh, I don't want anybody to know who I am, so they think I'm the character. But her thing was like, no, I want, you guys I'm very inclusive. It's just incredibly inclusive. I want everybody to be in on the joke with me. I want us all, like, you're my partner. The whole audience is my partner. You guys at home, and you felt that you were with her, you know, we were all doing this together, which was very rare, you know, and it was so cool. I don't know. Um, yeah, so I loved all that stuff. You could tell that it was a true ensemble. It wasn't, even though it was called the Carol Burnett Show, it wasn't, well, I'm going to be, oh, you got that joke? Well, I'll be saying that joke, which I now know, like, that happens a lot, where the person had, you know, um, sometimes a host or whatever would go, wait, they're getting a bigger laugh than me. I want that laugh, you know, or whatever. And I get it, you know, if you're, I understand. But no, it just seemed like, if anything, um, she was equally funny, but equally that kind of, you know, if it was a rock band, the bass, you know what I mean? She's just keeping the thing, letting everybody else, Tim Conway and Harvey Korman and Vicki Lawrence go, ooh, but she was just this steady thing, kind of going, all right, we're all, you know, like the, you know, and I'm keeping you guys all in line. And then she would pop out and do something hilarious, but then let them do their thing. And you know, they always talk about them breaking and stuff, but she, you know, she broke. But most of my time, if I had to think about it, it was always she would hold it together. You know, she would hold it, she would keep it together, and it was really Harvey Korman who would lose his and um, but you know, that's what I mean. Like, she would let them do their thing, and but you just got a sense that she would be the most perfect person to like work for and live with. Yeah, I had a huge crush on her. Yeah, I thought she was totally beautiful and a type of, yeah, women I like. It's like you can, I just trace it back to Carol Burnett, you know. It's like, yeah, that she wasn't afraid to be a goofball, you know, and and that she was just having fun. That was the other thing about that show is it, and again, that's a very American thing. I mean, I love British comedy. I love Monty Python. I love Blackadder. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I grew up on. And and then, you know, when I started SNL, you always want to keep the facade that this is a very real thing and this is a real character you're playing. And I generally do believe that. You know, I went through Second City in Los Angeles, not in Chicago or Toronto, but in Los Angeles. And that was the thing you kind of learned, you know, that we were taught, you know, you make this a reality and you don't, you know, and you're in the scene and you want to play it as straight as possible. And that's where most of the comedy will come from. And I generally agree with that. When you But then there's also this very American thing about Carol Burnett, which is people like watching people have a good time, you know? And um, and that was that show from top to bottom. It was just unabashedly. It wasn't a very cynical show. It wasn't a very. I didn't feel like it was a very political show. It was just, you know, turn on and just watch this and enjoy yourself. But there was jokes. There was artistry in it. There was acting in it. I mean, she did. There was a lot of. It sounds pretentious, but they were artists, you know, making stuff. It wasn't just pandering to an audience, which I really appreciated too, you know. I relate to that. I was that person on SNL, and I will, you know, yeah. Kristen Wiig was more, or Amy Poehler were more of the Carol Burnett's, you know, and I would say Fred Armisen was the Tim Conway. He had my number, or Will Forte too was the Tim Conway. They just both had my number, and they would try all they could to make me break. It is embarrassing. I remember playing the character Stefan, and I broke every one. I think we did 16 of them, and I didn't do a single one without breaking because John Mulaney, the writer, would change things on the cue cards to throw me off. And what it is that it's actually a lot of it's tension. You're very nervous. I get very nervous before I perform, and actually I don't. And like, performing in front of a live audience is a very nerve-wracking experience for me, and so I would get so nervous and so tense. And so what would help me is to just get into a character, and then okay, so you know, you're letting this character kind of guide you, and you're okay, but you're still tense, and so. You know, the simplest things I'm a very soft touch, and then I just like go off, you know, and laugh. And and I would watch Harvey Korman go through that, where it is. I always saw kind of that tension when you're performing in front, and there's a giant, and you're on national television. Having that, be there, that there's that tension that then people who are a little more calm could just take advantage of that. And Fred Armisen was the king of it for me. Yeah, he would do stuff. We did that sketch, The Californians, and he would just change the way he would say a line from blocking, and he would draw out his lines, and it would just send me, I just couldn't handle it. I would just start laughing, and he would stare at me when the camera was on me. He would look at me like that, and then when the camera would go back to him, he would snap back and do his part, and then when it cut to me, he would go, I mean, just anything. And I watched, and it reminded me of that Tim, the way you would watch, you would see, I knew as a kid, when Tim Conway was improvising and doing something different, because he would always kind of walk, he would get in their space, which is the best way to make someone laugh, is to get in there, is is you're supposed to be standing over there, to walk over and get next to you and get in your space just makes you start giggling and laughing, like, dude, what are you doing? Get off of me. And Tim Conway did it all the time. That was the tell in that, is he would walk over and kind of go like, well, I don't, and he would act, and it was funny because you see him go, and then like Carol Burnett would like hold herself, and then usually he would repeat something a bunch, or he would, which Fred would do. One time, Fred and I did a sketch, and he just came in with a different jacket on than we had blocked. He came in with this giant jacket on, and I started laughing. And I was like, "What are you?" Just had this, like, just little things. It's never a full bit, It was just little things to set me off and confuse me, and I'd be like, And I think I related a lot. I liked the way Harvey Korman performed. I think especially when I on SNL, when I played Vincent Price, I'm essentially just doing Harvey Korman. I mean, that's all I'm doing. When I think of it, I'm just like, oh, I'm doing Harvey Korman, which is that kind of high status person that you just take a pen and go, psst, and they just deflate and don't know what to do, And he did that better than anybody. And so, yeah, that's all. Yeah, I'm very clearly subconsciously doing Harvey Korman in that sketch, and a lot of sketches probably too, but definitely, if you watch any of the Vincent Price sketches, I'm just doing Harvey Korman. It did feel like an improv show, but that's why they were so good. They were such good actors, They were such wonderful actors, and they were listening to each other. That was a big thing. You could tell they were very much like engaged with each other and listening to each other, and that's, and they all came from theater, I'm sure, and that's what it comes, They just had that like just great training or whatever it was, But I think all those actors, that's why I love actors from that era. They just had such a natural way of delivering lines, and it's just a personality you just don't see anymore, When I would watch SCTV and stuff, like the things they would make fun of, like, are these kind of entertainers, or, the game show hosts and the newsmen and stuff. It's just a different breed of person that you just don't see anymore. And I loved when Harvey Korman and Tim Conway would play those characters. And if Harvey Korman played just like a straight newsman, he would just make it funny just by the way he played it, And I'm forgetting Vicki Lawrence. I'm sure people say this all the time, but I remember when I saw Vicki Lawrence, I was like, oh, it's so cool. She has her sister on the show too. It's so nice that she hired her sister to come and I forever thought they were sisters. I mean, it's insane how much they look and act alike. I mean, it was really crazy forever until, I was in my late 20s where I was like, really? They're not sisters? Even when they made them up to be very sketchy, because it was a very, like, a variety show, and it was a very sketch show. So it was very sketchy by its nature, but they would somehow transcend that with their performing, I thought, and make it feel really, I believed what was going on, even if it was just totally insane. And Vicki Lawrence would have like crazy pigtails and be like dressed up like a little 5-year-old. I would believe what was happening. I would get wrapped up in the emotion of the thing, you know. I grew up loving old movies, and I think the way I connected, you know, with my family and stuff, the way, I mean, you know, we didn't like really watch sports or even a lot of television, to be honest. We watched old movies, you know, and I still watch a ton of old movies. I just love that era, you know. So anytime they would send up old movies, it made me, felt like they were doing it specifically for me, because none of my friends had seen Gone with the Wind, or who had seen, you know, some film noir thing or whatever. The Joan Crawford one is where the guy's cleaning the window and she cuts the thing and he falls off, and then she's like, I don't know why men like, well, I can't find a man, you know. God, that was funny. That was another reason why she was so attractive to me, is that she would make herself look hideous, and that was super attractive, you know. I mean, she had a lot of confidence, you know. That was great.
I had a year-long contract to do a Merv Griffin show every 2 weeks, and suddenly I get a call that there's a brand new show going on. It's the first season, and it's Carol Burnett, who everyone loved. Everyone, we all just adored Carol. She was so charming and sweet and funny and amazingly talented, and that they wanted me to do 3 shows that first season. And I got to come out to California, to Los Angeles, and I stayed at the Farmer's Daughter Motel, I think it was, across from CBS Television City. And I went to rehearsals and I got to meet her, and I was kind of like, wow, you know, it was very exciting. And I remember I had some knitting and I brought it because I was so nervous that I wanted to do something. I couldn't just sit there, so I sat there and I was knitting during rehearsal. Just so rude. But I didn't. I was like, I'll just do something with my hands, you know. I'll just. But to meet everybody and to see the show and to be a part of it was just so much fun. We got to watch the rehearsals and laugh, and you know, so that people felt where the laughs were and where things were working. And then we got to watch the other production numbers if we were in that day for that rehearsal, and the dance numbers. And so it was really fun. And then I think they had a run through in the afternoon, like a dress rehearsal, so we could watch some of that. But again, we were busy getting dressed and ready for our own performances. So I don't think it was really until the show went on the air that we sat back in our own living rooms and got to see the end result and go, I like that. Oh, I wish I'd done that differently, you know. But it was a great experience. I don't remember interacting with Tim, except I remember watching him in some of the sketches and just, I mean, practically crying. He was so funny. That was before he was a regular. It wasn't till later in a subsequent season. Lucille Ball was a little scary to me. Not because she was trying to be or was mean or anything else, but she was tough. I want, you know, and she was, well, she was Lucille Ball. So it was kind of, hello, Miss Ball. You know, these are in her later year, you know, after the I Love Lucy was finished and all of that, and she had gone on to do so many other things. And I was a little scared of her, but she got a little feisty a couple times. Things weren't the way she wanted them, and Carol was so gracious. She wasn't ever mean or nasty. I don't mean that. I just mean she was very determined that things were going to be, this is what I need kind of thing. And I thought, yeah, that's a star. Yeah. And Carol was so gracious. Of course, she just is. She's just an amazing woman. She was so gracious with Lucy and whatever she wanted, and kept her laughing and kept her happy. And it was a great show. Bob Mackie dressed Carol. I wish Bob Mackie had dressed me. I guess I just had my own things. Yeah. I offered those. They said, we want a ballad and an up-tempo, and then I don't remember the exact process, but of course they had to give approval, and then I believe they wrote full arrangements, because some of them were small band arrangements, but they had strings and all of that, so they wrote bigger, and there was that full orchestra. Oh, God, it was so wonderful. One of my favorites was Try to Remember. And because I did that as sort of a ballad, and then we went into sort of a jazz waltz, and I had come up with that arrangement, and I just really liked it. because people tended to sing it more like a ballad. Try to remember the kind of September, you know, and we went to try to remember that kind. You know, we took it and had a lightness, a lilt to it, and we did it both. I did it both ways. I did it, and you know, it was fun that way. I always wanted to try to take songs and give them some little twist or turn that maybe someone hadn't thought of, to make them my own in some way. They were so supportive of the performers. I mean, doing a show like that every single week, and those great writers they had, Ken and Mitzi and Buzz Cohen. I still know Buzz Cohen. You know, I still know some of these people. And it was fun. My husband and I sat down, because, you know, he's been a production designer forever. And he was like, I know, and the stage manager, and the, you know, we know these people from so many years. And we're still friends with one of the dancers on the show, Randy Doney, who lives down in Palm Springs, and keep in touch with him now and then. I saw him not too long ago. Yeah, he's still dancing. All these years later, still dancing and in great shape. Amazing. I think they were very, very smart to include her questions with the audience, where she could be herself, have those cute little ad-libs that she would do. She was so relatable, and you needed to have that touchstone for her, so that when she went to play character, you even had a greater appreciation for her ability to transform herself into a snarky this, or a selfish that, or an egotistical this. One of my favorites that in one of the shows was the one where she and Harvey play an older couple, and she comes out and she says, "Okay, get it started." He gets the rocking chair, and she goes like this with her body, and then flops into the, you know, she's amazing. Her physical comedy and her manifestation of a character in her body was just wonderful to watch. I remember when we did the Valley of the Dolls sketch, I hadn't done any acting. And it was the perfect sketch for me, because I didn't have to have any expression. I was supposed to be completely, but the one thing I remember is being ready to just completely crack up and ruin the sketch. And I saw that moment in the clip I watched, where it was this kind of, you know, it's like I'm just holding back with everything I can. And it was fun. I loved watching Vicki with Carol. They were wonderful together. And I saw Vicki not too many years ago, and she's just amazing. She's out there doing her characters and just as gracious as ever, and what a great career she's had from that show. She's just gone on and on and on, done so much. She was not a prima donna in any way. She was an improvisational sketch artist, team player. She's the kind of person that, they didn't have it back then, but would have been in Second City, you know, would have been the Tina Fey, Amy Poehler. She just wanted everyone to shine. And of course, you know, it's like one time I opened the show for George Burns in Las Vegas, and this one he was like 90-something, and he gave me 100% co-billing. Well, please, he's George, he's God, for heaven's sakes, you know. And I said to him, I said, that was so generous. He says, nope, more important you look, the more important I look. See, that's these people who grew up from the vaudeville and all of that, the people with big, generous sense of what the business is about, these team players. And so working with people like Carol and Harvey and Tim and and Vicki and all these great people was just such an education for me. That was the brilliance of Carol, that when she would get on stage, all the stops were out. Whereas many of the others of us were learning how much we could do. I mean, back then I used to sing mostly from here on up, and it took me a while to really get into my body and be willing to just let my body go. But Carol had this fearlessness about her, and that's what we loved. She would just fling herself into anything. She'd fling herself wide open, big megaphone voice. She'd fling herself into the comedy. She'd fling herself into the question and answers. That was her brilliance, I think, her willingness to do and to go as far as she needed to go, do whatever she needed to do. I used to do a song that she did called In the Meantime, Before I was born, a lot of things happened, a lot of things happened, but not to me. And it goes, but in the meantime, it goes really big. But she had this huge voice. When she would belt it out, she had a much bigger voice than I did. But I loved that song. I used to do that. Da 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 da. We did watch the show. I loved the show. I was so excited when my shows were coming up. Yeah. Tim and Harvey, of course. You know, any of the sketches, that was the best. I mean, anytime Tim and Harvey were together and with Carol, you know. But those two and the way they would try to, well, Tim would crack Harvey up. That was his goal in life. And of course, the classic one in the dentist's office with the Novocaine and the, you know, these things that have just become part of our what is it, legacy of comedy in this country and probably around the world. And they were a pair just almost unrivaled as far as I can remember. When Tim sticks the thing in his head and then his leg, and he's, oh, it's crazy, it's crazy. I can't imagine that some of the SNL ladies or great younger women of comedy like Tina Fey and Amy Poehler didn't look at Carol Burnett and go, wow,